Good afternoon. My name is Paul Charnier. I'm the editorial page editor at The Day, and I welcome you to another and our final edition of Lunch with the Candidates. Today we'll be discussing issues concerning our region and the state with the candidates in the 43rd House District, which includes the towns of Stonington and North Stonington. Our candidates in that race are the incumbent Democrat, Representative Diana Urban, and her Republican challenger, Nick Mullane. With this format, as always, we'll spend the next hour talking to the candidates. We're not putting a clock on them, but we'll ask them to be succinct and to stick to the question. And if anyone goes on too long, I'll move the discussion along. We're going to go straight to our questions, and at the end of our discussion, both candidates will get a minute to sum up. So with that, we'll get started. And the first, I also want to I meant to mention I'm joined by two Day staff writers, Joe Wojcik and Ann Baldelli. Okay, with that, I'll get to the first question, which is from Mr. Wojcik to Representative Urban.
Diana, Mr. Mullane has said if you're such a champion of results-based accountability, funding state programs on the results they achieve, you should have introduced a bill mandating its implementation in every agency of state government years ago. He charges you haven't because the Democratic leadership will not let you. Can you respond to that?
Yeah, I certainly can. First of all, results-based accountability is in 43 different agencies. It is monitored by the Appropriations Committee. If you go to their website, you can get the report cards that those 43 agencies are doing, and we are moving into the rest of the agencies. In addition, we do have in statute the Children's Report Card. Children and families cost the state of Connecticut about $5.6 billion a year. This Children's Report Card tracks their health, safety, and welfare. We look at our Connecticut children in safe homes. Are they healthy? Are they in a stable living environment? And what kind of education are they getting? And we have all that data done, and we are now drilling down into programs so that we can say which programs are working and which aren't. And actually, Joe, I was just invited to Ireland, all expenses paid by the Irish Parliament, for me to tell them how we have been able to do what we've been able to do in the state of Connecticut. Right now in Ireland, a child has to wait 4 years to get an eye exam. I can tell you in the state of Connecticut exactly what we're doing with low birth weight babies, exactly how long it takes a child to get an eye exam, because we have data-informed decision-making on the Children's Committee with the Children's Report Card, and we are moving forward with that results-based accountability throughout our government. I didn't put it in statute for the entire government because we already had performance-based budgeting in statute and we were not following it. We were simply ignoring it. So when we got together, myself with the chairs of appropriations, we said it's better to do it, not put it in statute and run away and hope it happens, but we were actually going to make it happen, which is what we did. And then when we got to the Children's Report Card, it seemed appropriate at that point to actually put it in statute.
Mr. Mullane.
My only comment would be is the philosophy is wonderful. I don't believe it's working or has worked. If you look at the trend analysis of spending versus, let's say, population or the per capita income of Connecticut, it's not working. The spending has continually gone up uncontrolled. The population has declined. If you remember, we're going to go back a few years. We used to have 6 congressmen, now we have 5. Okay, and 27% of the people, the last survey I saw, want to leave Connecticut because of its business climate. So I'm going to blame the legislature that their results-based accountability does not work, has not worked, and it is not effective. Therefore, you're not applying a use it right. I used to do that sort of work at Electric Boat. And I must tell you, they were much more abrupt and direct. If it didn't work, they changed it right away. They didn't wait for any time. And usually their own people did it, but if somebody else found it, it was fixed immediately or you were removed from the position. okay? And I don't believe it is working. It's a nice story that Diane is telling, but the trend analysis of Connecticut, where we're at now, understand we're in the biggest financial crisis we've ever had. The state is broke. It can't afford to do anything. Its biggest task in the next budget is to cut services and work that we're doing. So I don't agree with it at all.
Well, let's give Representative Urban a chance to respond. Mr. Mullane seems to make the point if results-based accountability was being effective, wouldn't the state be in better fiscal health than it appears to be?
Well, first of all, Paul, what I would say to you is one of the biggest lessons you learn in the General Assembly is you have to figure out how to get to yes. You're not dealing with one person. You're not dealing with three people. You're dealing with 186 different personalities, and you have to see how do we get to yes. I would tell you on my committee, I'm chair of the Committee on Children, all my bills come out unanimously. Why? Because I figured out we need to talk across the aisle and we need to get to yes. As far as results-based accountability, we cut $20 million from early reading success because the program wasn't working. We just cut a couple of $1 million from teen pregnancy because the program wasn't working. We have reallocated resources in restraint and seclusion. Nobody knew that we had 35,000 incidences of restraint and seclusion in your schools in Connecticut until my committee and the Children's Report Card said, we want the data. Now we are dealing with that issue. We are making it better for children who are now not being put in closets with no windows and the doors shut. And we are training our faculty to deal with these restraint and seclusion in a way that it's meant to be dealt with. As far as people leaving Connecticut, I'm not sure where Nick is getting his information. But Dan Haar just wrote an article for the Hartford Business section where people from 30 to 45 are returning to Connecticut. They're returning to Connecticut because of our high-tech abilities, because of the incredible educational institutions that we have here. And I would say to you, because I'm very happy, my own son, who is an attorney in Washington, D.C., is returning to Connecticut. Returning to Connecticut because of the atmosphere that he finds in Connecticut. He and his wife just had a baby. They want a place where they feel they have the Mystic Seaport, the shore, the mountains, the hiking, the educational institutes, Hartford, New Haven, Stanford, all these business centers, close proximity to Providence, Boston, and New York City. He's coming back. And if you talk to Dan Haar, he'll tell you that age group is also coming back.
All right, let's before we move on to another question, I want to give Mr. Mullane one more chance if he'd like to. The representative seems to have a different impression than you do of how Connecticut is doing as far as people wanting to stay here. I want to give you a last word if you'd like.
The financial crisis we have is not imaginary, it's real. It's going to be disastrous in the next budget. And if I look at the trend analysis of population, the population growth is minimal as compared to the per capita growth income as compared to the expenditures. And the Yankee Institute has done a survey on that, and the lines are disastrous in regard to going all the wrong way. And losing a congressman was a significant thing, okay? And I don't agree with what Diane is saying. I have 3 children that now all of them live out of state. One in Washington, D.C., one in New York City, one just moved from Groton to Westerly. So North Stonington is a phenomenal place to live. But I'll tell you this, I've been in North Stonington since 1970, and I watch as the seniors retire, they move out of state. They go to Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, Arizona, and so forth. And a lot of our senior people that are usually involved with volunteerism, mentoring in the school, are leaving, because financially the benefits elsewhere are so much more rewarding, Many states don't charge for pensions. We do. We have an enormous amount of fees, taxes, and so forth. I think the Yankee Institute said there's 360 nuisance type taxes, okay? And North Stonington and Connecticut is an expensive place to live, and people are leaving, and they're the kind of people we want to stay.
All right, thank you. With that, we'll move to another question, and it's from Ann Baldelli, and it's to Mr. Mullane.
Mr. Mullane, would you support construction of a third casino in the state to reduce the loss of patrons and jobs to the planned Springfield Casino? If so, should that casino be restricted to the Mohegan and Mashantucket tribes or open to any casino developer?
As you all know, I hate gambling. We've got it. We've got to protect it. I would support a third one. I don't like that answer because along with it goes the social problems, but I think we have to do it to preserve the income stream, and the income stream has reduced significantly from what it was at its peak. As far as restricting it, if the law will allow, I would support that, okay? But I think that the study has to be done as to what can be the best for Connecticut, because now it's all about revenue. Who can get the best revenue return on the dollar? Okay, and I don't have the answer to that. If the answer is the Mashantuckets and the Mohegans, leave it with them. Okay, if it's somebody else, then bid it out.
Just to clarify, so do you think the law is not clear, that there may be a question whether or not the state can legally restrict it to the tribes?
No, I don't know if there is a question on that. I don't think there is. What I'm saying, this is about how much money you can get for the return for gambling. So there should be a study as to how do we get the most money out of it if we're going to do it. And it looks like we have to do it to preserve our share.
All right, thank you. Representative Verman, your position on that?
I just would like him to clarify. Did he say he's in favor of a third casino? Is that what you said?
Yes.
You said you're in favor. Okay. As chair of the Committee on Children, I can, not in good conscience say that we need more gambling. As an economist, I cannot say we need more gambling. Gambling doesn't produce anything. It's when you are talking about capital development, you want to produce something that produces something else. Gambling is basically a strain on everybody's resources. That being said, I'm surprised at what Mr. Mullane said, because he has spent an incredible amount of North Stonington's money fighting the casinos. We've had lawyers down in Washington, D.C. with thousands and thousands of dollars, Nick, that you decided we needed to fight the casinos. What I would have done, Montville worked with the Mohegan Sun. They worked together. The Mohegan Sun gives Montville a payment off the top. Mr. Mullane fought the casino. Not that I don't think we have to establish our position, that we are also sovereign and they're sovereign, and now we need to negotiate with each other. If we had negotiated with the Mashantuckets, we probably would have some relationships like sharing our fire departments. Maybe they have an incredible ability to fight fires there. Maybe talking about how we could have development that would spin off and work for both of us, but we haven't done that. When he talks about a third casino and what kind of development that would bring, we did a REMI model with the University of Connecticut. As you know, in my other life, I'm an economist. So we looked at the multiplier effect of the casino. The multiplier effect of the casino is basically gas stations and donut shops. That's what the multiplier is. So if you're going to do a third casino, if you want more gas stations and donut shops, fine. I don't. I think that we need to look at this from the perspective of, we have the two casinos. Are we afraid that the Springfield casinos are going to draw people away? Yeah, maybe it will in the beginning, but resources reallocate. Anybody that's an economist knows that. And then you come back to an equilibrium. I don't believe that a Springfield casino, I believe our Mohegan Sun and our Mashantuckets can do product development. Look what they're doing. They have where are we supposed to be going? I'm supposed to be going someplace to get Crocs for, the shoes. They have the outlets. Now, that's it, I know it. They have the outlets there. So they've developed that. They have entertainment there. The Mohegan Sun does the same thing. So they continue product development, and let's stay with those two and let them build their casino in Springfield and have some competition.
All right, let's give Mr. Mullane to respond to your opponent's point that is it inconsistent in that you have had often a difficult relationship and adversary relationship with the casino on the border of your town. So if you could address whether there's an inconsistency in your position now.
With the
supporting a third
casino, no. We had great problems with the tribe taking land in trust and the Eastern Pawcatuck Easterns becoming a tribe when they're not deserving. We had problems with taking land in trust and tribal recognition, and that's what we spent the lawyers on. We did not spend any money on opposing the casinos. The casinos went in. Nobody knew what was going on. It wasn't a surprise. It was a shock. Okay, so Ms. Urban is incorrect. We didn't spend money opposing casinos. And, okay, I'm surprised at myself and my answer because a casino has no added value. What it does is anything around it, it'll absorb, such as the restaurants are cheaper, they're high quality, and a lot of the other things that are provided, the entertainment. It's tough competition for the people in the area, and I don't begrudge the town that's going to get it because the added traffic is going to be a problem. I looked at it only financially in regard to we've got it. Okay, so let's preserve what we've got. And when all the casinos kick in New England, the market is going to be so spread, and I think people are getting very wise. For those advocates or teaching gambling has no value, I donate that to them every day of the week, because I've seen the problems it's caused in North Stonington with the broken households, the spent money that would have gone for a new car, an addition, an upgraded house, a college education, or just keeping the family together. So the people who say, yes, I want it, they better make sure they know what they're getting, and they better look for some impact aid like we're getting, because it hasn't gone away.
All right. Do you have anything more? I'll give you a brief comment, and if not, we'll go to the next question.
Now, Paul, I'm just going to go back to what I said. When you look at something like this, I always look at it from the perspective of being an economist. And not just that perspective. That gives me the benefit cost, but I also look at it as concern our children and our families. And I stand by my answer. If Mr. Mullane said he was trying to keep them from annexing land, trying to keep them from annexing land is a direct impact on whether they can build a casino. So when he says that's all he was doing, it's not all he was doing. He was fighting them tooth and nail. Montville did not fight tooth and nail. They sat down, they got an agreement, and they're very happy there. I know my reps over there are very happy with the Mohegan Sun. We still have an adversarial relationship. We are wasting a resource that we could use in the towns of North Stonington, Stonington, and surrounding towns to work together to make a better place.
All right. We're going to move on to the next question with that, and it's to you, Representative Urban. The state's prevailing wage law requires that contractors doing any public project over $400,000, which these days means almost any project, effectively have to pay a union-level wage. Do you support that law? And if so, should it be adjusted so towns can undertake more projects without having to pay the prevailing wage, thereby saving local taxpayers money?
You know, Paul, I think the threshold needs to be changed. I'm not going to argue that. But on the other side of that, I'm going to argue that a prevailing wage is a wage that a family can live on. It's a wage that allows someone to take care of their children, to be able and go out, maybe a little entertainment, have a home. It's not like a bad thing. I understand that the towns struggle because when they're doing a project, they have to pay prevailing wage. And as I said, we could raise the threshold. But I would also point out to you that when you're not paying that prevailing wage and they're contracting out, you're not sure the quality of the work that you're getting. And we can talk about a bridge in North Stonington and something that happened there, and we can talk about a bunch of other things throughout the state where if you're not paying the prevailing wage and you're not dealing with a contractor that has to be above board, you can have incidences where the work that's being done, and I know there's some that are just completely outrageous, happen. So it's a very difficult question, and it's a question that we're facing today throughout our country when we're talking about the minimum wage. When you're talking about two people working minimum wage and they can't afford an apartment in Hartford that's not more than 30% of their income, you have a problem. And that's across the country. That's not just Connecticut. So when we're talking about paying prevailing wage, we're talking about paying our neighbors, our friends, the people that populate the state of Connecticut, a wage that allows them to take care of their families.
Just to clarify on the threshold, you mean raising the $400,000?
Yes. Because we raised it once. And, and I think it was a good deal that we raised it once. I do think that we need to take a look at what kind of projects you're talking about that you can do for $400,000 and under, which are not many in this day and age. So raising that threshold, I'm not going to be opposed to raising the threshold. But when you get into a project that's several $1 million, then I think, we're looking at where the prevailing wage is something that I support.
All right. Mr. Mullane, you were a long-time first selectman in North Stonington. Your position on the prevailing wage, whether you support it, whether it needs to be changed? Your turn.
Prevailing wage no longer guarantees anybody. The person who gets the job can be union or non-union. They can be in-state or out-of-state. And then we have to live with the other issue, whereas you have to take the low bidder. In many occasions, the low bidder is not the good deal. I'll go back to 1995. We had a school project. Premier builder, okay, committed suicide, went bankrupt, and we had to call the bond. When they called the bond, we end up getting the same contractor back who did the bad work and didn't finish it to finish it. Since then, I've had other jobs that went out on prevailing wage and failed. There's no guarantee because it's prevailing wage and the low bidder that you're going to get a good deal. And let me get to the other point that you talked about, the minimum wage. The solution to that is to have a good economy. We do not have a good economy in Connecticut. We have very restrictive business laws, and we have things like prevailing wage that make it very difficult to do work in Connecticut. I would rather eliminate prevailing wage and hope with the amount of money we save, which would be enormous. Estimated savings at 10% on the school project of our share, $20 million, would be $2 million, and the state share, 1.8. That money could be spent on another project and keep people working on other work all year round. I'd rather have a thriving economy that answers and allows progression between whatever the minimum wage is to be able to progress in growth. Without growth, and Connecticut has not had nebulous growth since 1970. And if you don't have an economy and a growth in the economy and a growth in the population, you're stagnant. It doesn't work. And prevailing wage no longer has any value. At one time, its intent was to guarantee there would be a high quality. That's no longer a guarantee, and it's no longer what's happening.
And could you
Now-
clarify on the other issue you raised? On you say that you're obligated now to take low bid. Would you change those regulations as well?
I think I would go a different process. I'd ask people who are going to bid in Connecticut to go through a screening like DOT where they have acceptable, qualified contractors so you know who's the good guy and who's the bad guy. There has to be a review of the bid, but I reluctantly have taken a blind bid once. Never knew them, couldn't research them much, but they had state contracts. They failed terribly. They put in a pipe 500 foot long, and then because they put it in on a pitch, they drilled holes through it. And to try to get it to drain that way, it didn't work. We ended up with a very confrontational and ended up in arbitration. And arbitration doesn't work any longer either. They just split the baby. So I think the business climate, get rid of prevailing wage, has no value. I think the big thing is to improve Connecticut's economy so we have so much work, it's not a problem.
All right. I'm going to go to the next question because it seems like the positions there were quite clear on that particular issue. So we'll go to next question from Mr. Wojcik, and it's to Mr. Mullane.
You have said in your first debate a few weeks ago that you would want the state to run like North Stonington does. But Ms. Urban said the town still does not have a budget for 2016-17 fiscal year and still has not filed the final paperwork for the $300,000 that she helped secure from the state 14 months ago to help pay for the town's new emergency services building. Can you respond to that?
I don't know what the status of the $300,000 is. Town of North Stonington. We have an affordable debt in regard to the auditor for the school and emergency service. We have an undesignated fund balance of 11%. All of our retirement costs are fully funded. And I'm proud of how we left the town as it is now. The roads are in good condition. The drainage has been continued to be upgraded. And I think the town is in very good condition. And the reason I'm running this year is because I'm looking at the state and where they're going to get their money, and that's going to be by cutting town and city aid. And I'm scared to death of that. As far as our North Stonington, we're in excellent shape, and so is Stonington. Our government style is different. Legislative body, go straight to the people. I love it. Not comfortable all the time. It gets pretty ornery, but it's direct. I don't think there's anything wrong with North Stonington. And okay, lack of a budget. The first selectman and the Board of Selectmen unanimously agreed to challenge what the Board of Finance did this year. We sent out a questionnaire with the referendum that turned it down. It unanimously supported the first selectman and the selectmen and their positions, and it's not hurting any part of the operation of the town of North Stonington. It's part of what's called due process, directly through the people by their vote at a referendum. It doesn't get any better.
Representative Urban, so Mr. Mullane's made the point that North Stonington seems to be doing much better than the state is, so why not let them go to Hartford and try to fix the state's problems too?
First of all, the questions that on referendum were not unanimously adhered to. Not in any way, shape, or form, Nick. You need to check the vote on that. They were not unanimous. And that letter that went out, there were some ethics questions on that were sent to the state on the ethics of sending that letter out with looking at like it was official letter from the town of North Stonington when it was just Sean Murphy's letter. There were some very big issues that I got a lot of phone calls on that one. But I would say on that question that in 2008, I brought results-based accountability to the town of North Stonington when Nick was the first selectman. I brought out a little PowerPoint saying this is how you can organize. It's a great decision-making model. It will help you keep things so you know how much you do, how well did you do it, and is anyone better off. He completely rejected it, had nothing to do with it, did not want it. When he says that the town of North Stonington is in good shape, what about the schools, Nick? The schools are not in good shape because there was no maintenance done on the schools. There are so many stories about things that have happened in North Stonington where there hasn't been maintenance, there hasn't been attention paid because we're trying to keep the tax rate down, which is a good thing to keep the tax rate down, but you also have to pay attention to what's going on with your schools. And then when you're saying that you're concerned about local education aid, are you aware of the Supreme Court decision? And that decision is now being challenged by the Attorney General. But that doesn't matter. That Supreme Court decision said we are not paying enough money. We are underfunding our cities. And if we are underfunding our cities, we are overfunding, according to the ECS formula, our suburbs and our rural areas. If you recall, Nick, in the first appropriations budget, the Stonington ECS got cut over $1 million. Because of my ability to work with people, I was able to get that cut really taken care of. I was able to get $8 million in reimbursement for West Vine and Dean's Mill. I was able to get the spatial issue done with them, which is worth another $4 million. And I was also able to get them to end up $25,000 in the green on the municipal revenue sharing accounts, $25,000 plus, Nick. And then when you looked at North Stonington, I was able to keep their ECS cut to a minimum, $25,000, and I was able to get that $300,000 for the emergency services building, which has yet to have the paperwork filled out. And I got that in August of 2015. And when I've been asked, is that money still there? Yes, but if we don't act like we need it, if we don't act like we're going to fill out the forms to get it, it's going to make it extremely difficult for me to continue to keep that money live.
All right, let's get a chance for Ms. Mullane to respond to a couple of those things. One, Representative Urban talked about the point of deterioration the schools faced before you did recently get a bond issue approved. Do you bear some responsibility while you're first selectman that infrastructure was not better maintained? And also she raises the point about the emergency services building, which began, the improvements were planned beginning on your watch when you were first selectman, and it seems to have dragged on. So I want to give you a chance to respond to a couple issues that your opponent raised about your administration of the town.
The safety and maintenance of the school. The school is, in some cases, 1950 vintage and so forth. It has its normal wear and some of its outdated ambiance or appearance. They're safe, they're sound. There is always maintenance issues on schools. I believe they've been kept up so there has never been a safety issue. Okay, we have struggled for the last 10 years to come to a conclusion, and it was a difficult process in regard to whether we should keep the high school or not keep it, or what we should do. We finally came to a consensus and got it through, okay, and it will be updated. I'd like Diana Urban to give a specific of a safety issue that existed in the school that was of significance, that was life-threatening and a real problem. There's always people that complain about whether it be the town hall, the highway department, or the school. Yes. And, okay, the issue she raised about Mr. Murphy and him spending his own money to do a survey. Okay, he went out of his way to get information so we could have something to base a decision on from the people rather than the politicians who were involved. I didn't see any formal complaint filed. Did people not like it? They didn't like what he did and why he did it. but he went to get, how do I get the proper information so we can go to the Board of Finance and come to a consensus, and that's what we did. That's what we call due process. I don't have a problem with that. In regard to the school, I don't believe I can recall anything that was life-threatening or a severe problem.
How about in the emergency services building? She raised that as well as sort of an example of things not running well in North Stonington.
We've had difficult because the estimates that were used and the drawings that were used were not really viable, and by the time we changed them, the inflation factor and other things overtook it, and it did run over considerably. No, that has not gone well. What I will say, though, is we utilized the Emergency Service Committee, which was made up of mostly the emergency service people. Fire, ambulance, and police was actually involved also. And we did try to do something which was a 30 to 50 year building and make sure that we weren't going back to the people and have to put up with more arm twisting to try to get more money out. It has not gone well. We are now almost at a bid stage. We believe we're 3 months away. And yes, we've had difficulty coming with the cost of items and the design and how to economize it. Actually, it started at somewhere around 24,000 square feet. We couldn't get it done in somewhere around 19. We're down somewhere around 14,000 now. So we have cut the building to make it fit to the budget that we think is going to come in. And yes, we had never done one of these before. There was a lot of lessons learned. We have to admit that we stumbled a few times ourselves. We feel we are on track now, and we will end up with a design in about 3 months and be ready to go to bid.
All right. Since the topic was raised, before we move to another question, the topic of the school construction, we'll start with Representative Urban. I'll give Mr. Mullane a chance. North Stonington had the opportunity to send their high school students to Stonington High, which had ample room for them, which would have eliminated considerable expense for providing a high school in the small town of North Stonington. It also would have saved the state some money. So I was wondering where our two candidates stand on whether that was the right decision to pour that money into renovating a high school, or should decisions be made that are more fiscally prudent in that regard, given the limited state dollars? And I just wanted to hear from both of you, and I'll start with Representative Urban.
You know, Paul, that's a very difficult question. It's a difficult question because I'm the state representative, and I do not want to get into that particular local decision. I'm there to help them. But from my position as an economist and my position dealing with issues up in Hartford, it's very hard when you have a high school that's only 200 kids and you're graduating 45 to 50 a year to continue to get that educational cost-sharing money. Because when you're up in Hartford and you're looking at New Britain and you're looking at Bridgeport, where you have enormous problems with the schools, and they're saying, well, if you guys want a school of 200 kids, then you can pay for it. Because we've got multiple problems in Bridgeport and in Hartford. We have some of the poorest cities in the country. We might have the highest per capita income, but we also have the poorest cities and the biggest achievement gap in the country. So when North Stonington decides that they want their own high school, and I understand that that brings a sense of community. My own son graduated from Wheeler. I had to supplement him a little on some issues, but then, as he always said to me, I was his pain-in-the-butt mom who wanted to be sure that he had more than enough. I'm supportive of what they want, but I also want them to understand that there's a cost to that and that there's going to be an increasing cost as we're looking at this Supreme Court decision. To articulate with Stonington and bring those 200 kids to Stonington. Up in Hartford, I could do all kinds of things to help them as far as reimbursement rates and money, so that you're absolutely right when you say that that would be a boon to us as far as taxes, et cetera, go. I'm absolutely there to help if that was the decision. But the position that I'm in as their state representative, I don't want to take one side or the other. I want to say, here's what I can do when you're going to decide to build your own school, and here's what I can do if you decide to articulate with Stonington.
All right, I want to get a chance to Mr. Mullane to react to the same question.
Oh, okay, but I got to say I'm out of the loop here. I wasn't aware there was a study done and there was actually mathematics of what the savings would be for Stonington, North Stonington, or the state of Connecticut, so I'm a little out of the loop on that. And I don't recall anybody sticking them in front of me, but I get the theme of it, okay? And North Stonington is a very large area, 55 square miles, and to Stonington or anywhere else, it's problematic. There was a traffic issue, which is nebulous, okay? That's not a big deal. But right now, we've developed an education system. If you looked at the marks, we have the best ones in southeastern Connecticut and some of the best marks in the state of Connecticut. And I wasn't involved in the negotiation between North Stonington and Stonington. I was the first selectman for a long time. No one came to me and said, I got a deal for you, okay? And for quite a while, a lot of the schools were saying, we don't want any more because we don't want to get out of capacity. And as time went along, everybody's capacity decreased. So I don't accept these comments that it's cheaper what we didn't do versus what we did do. All I know is our performance is outstanding. And we're not kidding anybody. We're looking at it more than one ways. My children went through it, and they all did very well.
All right,
Okay.
we're going to switch gears then.
Paul, could I just
Very briefly, if you could.
I'll respond very briefly to this because, Nick, I came to the Board of Education with an Office of Legislative Research report that laid out exactly the difference in the cost.
All right,
That's all I
thank
have
you.
to say.
All right.
Why didn't you give me a copy, Diana?
Why weren't you at the meeting, Nick?
Next question is from Ann Baldelli, and it's to Representative Urban.
Rep. Urban, the state has reduced spending for tourism promotion and eliminated spending for the tourism districts. Do you support these cuts? And won't that hurt one of the region's major industries?
I love this question, Ann, because I went to the wall on this one with the governor and with Ben Barnes from OPM, and we have a tourism caucus. And I said to them, yes, they're keeping the big money for the keep Connecticut's still revolutionary, but when they're cutting our regional money, you're talking about people get to Connecticut, but then when they get to Connecticut, how do they know where the Cottrell Brewery is? Or how do they know what goes on in Old Mystic Village? Or how do they know about the apple picking or the wine trail? That's what your regional guys are doing. And we brought Ben Barnes into our tourism caucus, and we talked to him about it. And I talked to him about it from the perspective of an economist, trying to make sense about the benefit cost of cutting that money was not going to be there. He said after he had listened to us that he would reconsider. Well, he didn't reconsider. The governor zeroed those out. I'm a big proponent of behavioral economics. What they call is nudge. If you want something to happen, why don't you nudge it in a specific direction? By zeroing them out, they're basically saying you stink. We don't want you. We don't think you're doing anything right whatsoever. We're just zeroing you out. I said to Ben, you guys have cut them. And as you cut them, they've gotten leaner and they've learned how to do the job better. I said, how about a cut? How about another cut to say maybe you guys need to start to articulate with your local chambers of commerce? I know Tony Sheridan would do that. I know Lisa Kanicki would do it, so that they would form partnerships when that money got cut again. And Paul and I really thought he was listening, but apparently he wasn't, because they zeroed them out. And I think zeroing them out sends an incredibly wrong message about how important tourism has become to the state of Connecticut.
Mr. Mullane, your position and your opinion of the budgetary decision to cut tourism promotion and to eliminate the tourism districts?
I have been a big advocate of tourism. It's, from what I understand, 2.5 to 3 times the dollar return on investment. And we probably have the biggest draw in Connecticut. We should have been the last one to cut. I do not agree with the governor, but I'm going to go back to the root of all the problem. We have a financial crisis. He had to do something. He did a lot of things I didn't like, okay? And I can understand his position. The legislature continued to improve and embellish budgets that we couldn't afford and do things that cost us a fortune, that put us in the political and the financial situation we're in. I have some sympathy for Governor Rowland. He's inherited a bunch of problems that has come from the past, mostly, or 99%, out of the legislature. And that is tax and spend. Well, we're at the end of the line. And you think that's bad? Wait till the next budget. It's going to be worse. And I hope we can have time and have a group that will look at it logically as to what's cost effective and what's not. Otherwise, there's going to be more errors in who you target. They're not the only one that I don't like, have not been properly funded or manned, okay? But I wholly support the tourism. It should have been a priority to keep. It's a moneymaker, and Stonington has a huge burden in the summer because of what they orchestrate and run in regard to the events, plus the aquarium, the seaport, the boating, and all the rest, okay? They actually deserve some impact aid, because for what they have to do for the special events, I'm sure they're not doing it without overtime. So I'm just a down-to-earth, what works and what makes money type thing. That makes money, and you have a group down there that are so specialized in what they do and how they do it, and how they advertise, and how they man the website. It's disappointing that it had to be taken apart to some degree. Mr. Dombrowskis has done a wonderful job down there with a skeleton crew and a lot of volunteers and a lot of the local merchants that supplied an enormous amount of help and aid in the advertising and carrying out a system that works. There's a lot of money sent to Hartford from Stonington, and there's really, between the seaport and the aquarium, you got education, you got the boats, you got all kinds of stuff. It's a phenomenal donation that Stonington does for the state of Connecticut.
I'm going to move on to another question. We've had an unusual presidential race this year in that both candidates have unusually high negative numbers from the public. Both have had their respective scandals that have dogged them. So we're going to ask both candidates, starting with Mr. Mullane, who do you plan to support for president and why?
I can give you all the good reasons why I won't vote for either one of them. I don't think there's too many answers I can give you why I can say that that candidate is good. Okay, I cannot tell you. I've been through a lot of presidential elections. I've seen a lot of surprises. And this is the most disappointing year I've ever seen. We don't have a good choice. Okay? If I had to make a choice, believe it or not, and people are going to hate me for this, I'd probably vote for Trump. And he won't last more than 4 years, which would probably be good. And maybe with that, the rest of the politicians will straighten out and start doing things right and responding to the people, so there's some credibility when a politician stands up and talks, and that's including me. We have to have more credibility. We don't have any in Hartford, and we don't have any in Washington. I'm going to tell you the same old story. My son worked for the Congress for 13 years and quit. His basic comment was, Dad, it doesn't work. At that point in time, he was working for the Senate Budget Committee. It doesn't work. They don't care. They make political decisions, and they don't care about the people. They're not listening to the people, and somehow or another, we got to shake them up. Did I answer your question?
Well, I'll let your opponents raise that issue whether or not I like.
Reluctantly, I'd
I'll
vote
leave that
for
to the
Trump.
viewers and the voters. Representative Irvin, what do you plan to do
Sure.
in our presidential race?
You know, Paul, I'd like to preface this by saying that Donald Trump has struck a note with the American people. And it's the person that feels disenfranchised. It's the person that's in the middle class who says, what happened to me? We have the 0.5% that's making money, and then we have the poverty person who's able to get help, but I don't get it. That being said, and I think that's something that we need to start paying attention to. That being said, the man is not fit to be president. And I am saying that because he has given men permission to diss women. That in government as well as business is not a good thing. I myself have been sexually harassed as a legislator. I know what it's like. And I know that there are women out there that have also been sexually harassed and know what it's like. When we were in Ireland, as I was brought over by the Irish Parliament to talk about the Children's Report Card, every single person that I ran into, they're members of Parliament, and you know they have a different system when you have 5, I believe, sort of people running things. Every single one of them said, whatever happens, do not let that happen, because in the world stage, it's going to be a disaster. And I was like, well, I can't really stop it myself, but I hear you. That being said, Hillary Clinton. You know, Hillary started out with a children's trust fund. She graduated from Yale. She focused and devoted herself to children. I was a great admirer of her work with children. She has had some difficulties, and there are certainly issues that I take exception to. She would not be the person that I would choose, my first choice, to be our first woman president. But that being said, she's in a really difficult position. A lot of the things that she's done, most guys have done. So, yeah, I will be voting for Hillary. I'm a little afraid of the fact that she seems to be a bit of a warmonger. But I also think the girl has got incredible experience. She knows how to handle things in D.C. And, you know, I'm actually going to agree with my opponent. D.C. is in gridlock. I don't believe that we're going to see anything coming out of D.C. What I believe is you should think about who you're electing on your local levels, because that's what's going to impact your schools, your air, your roads, etc. Think about that. And, you know, as far as the presidential goes, I don't see D.C. moving out of gridlock, regardless of who the president is.
All right, thank you. Get to another question. It's from Joe Wojcik, and it's to Representative Urban.
Diana, some of your critics say you sometimes appear concerned more with animal issues than human problems. Your opponent has pointed to a bill you introduced concerning banning the sale and trade of ivory and rhinoceros horn as evidence you do not deal with issues that people care about. Can you respond and also talk about your concern about issues that affect animals?
Thanks for that question, Joe. Yeah, I know sometimes people think I'm a one-trick pony, but I'm definitely not a one-trick pony. I mean, look at Ireland. They invited me over to talk about children's issues, not about animal issues, but about children's issues. The rhinoceros horn and the elephant tusk, that's about the elimination of a species. We are talking a situation where the elephant is going to become extinct. And it's going to become extinct because we're hunting them for their tusks. We're hunting them for their tusks because they are funding terrorist movements. The whole chain there, you know, it's the whole thing about follow the money. You follow that money and you can follow it from the elephant tusk right down to the terrorism movement, because that's where that money's going. So yeah, I think that's a pretty good bill to start to think about that, because I think terrorism is a problem. When you go to the animal issues that I do, we just got the data on cross-reporting. We're the only state in the nation where our Department of Agriculture reports to our Department of Children and Families on animal cruelty from the Department of Agriculture and child abuse from the Department of Children and Families. They actually talk to each other. These two agencies that are usually silos talk to each other. In 2015, there were 63 incidences of them cross-reporting. Out of those, 9 of the animal cruelty charges showed up on our DCF as open cases that DCF was thinking of closing, which they didn't close because animal cruelty link to violence is clear-cut. Almost 80% of our school shooters started with animal cruelty. So 9 children there, 8 children that DCF did not know about. So 17 children because of cross-reporting, which cost the state nothing. The 2 agencies were thrilled to be able to do this, to work together and to make a positive impact on children and animals. So when people say to me the things that I'm doing, all I do is I care about animals, what you don't understand is I am not just saying we have to stop being cruel to animals. I'm saying, what does that cruelty to animals mean? We have children that are being suspended and expelled in preschool. Now let me ask you a question. There was a kid who strangled his sister's cat because he was mad at his sister, okay? Killed it. It was a Siamese cat. You want to know how old that child was? 4 years old. So if we're not paying attention to that child strangling that cat, who do you think is going to get expelled from school, preschool? There is a link. There's a link in bullying. If you look at somebody that's taken a kitty and put it in the microwave, you think that child's okay? You think that child's going to be able to handle school? That's what I'm talking about when I talk about animal cruelty. I'm talking about policy. I'm talking about how we can interrupt the cycle of violence. Sandy Hook, right there, with the therapy animals. We're missing stuff that we can do at little or no cost.
We're getting near the end of our hour. I want to give
Okay.
a chance, Mr. Mullane, to comment whether he feels the incumbent.
I don't have a problem with that type of legislation. I think my disappointment is that the state's broke, okay, financially broke, and we're going to have one of the most difficult years. Diana sat there for her terms, 14, 15, 16 years, and watched it happen. I'm disappointed that she didn't stick her attention to the economy problem and the business climate. The business climate and the economy will solve all your problems. It'll bring the money in. Okay? So I guess my issue would be why she admitted the prevailing wage is wrong and ineffective. Why didn't she get it through? Every year there's a whole bunch of bills on prevailing wage. It goes nowhere because no one has any fortitude to really go after who's behind it, which is the unions and the leadership, to get the votes, okay? So if you stay out of the mainstream and stay in those areas where nothing's really a mistake, and I commend her for that work, but you can't let the economy go down the tubes and let the financial aspect be so difficult that you're going to have to go in and cut a whole bunch of things that provide the quality of life and the ambiance that draws people to Connecticut. That was my point on that comment, and that's still my point.
All right, because we're at the end of our hour, and I wanted to leave time for closing comments. Both candidates will have a minute to sum up, and we'll begin with Diana Urban.
Well, if I can just briefly respond to what Nick just said, I was the one that did the bill that checks for regulations on small business. Any regulation that comes out since that bill went through is checked for its impact on small business, Nick. We haven't been able to go back in time because you have to get a number of people to agree to do that. But going forward, I also did GAP, Generally Accepted Accounting Principles. That was my bill, Nick. And we're now doing Generally Accepted Accounting Principles. So don't say I don't do things on the higher economic level. What I would say to people is, yes, we have difficult times. We have difficult times across this country. We face serious challenges, and we need a representative in Hartford who has experience. Are you thinking of moving to the south or to the west? Well, guess what? If you stay in Connecticut, you live on an average 4 years longer. That must mean we're doing something right. Are you raising a child in Connecticut? The Annie Casey Foundation ranks the 50 states on how they're doing with health, education, safety, and welfare of their children. The state of Connecticut ranks number 5, up, I'm very proud to say, since I became chair of the Committee on Children, up from number 7. For comparison, the state of Florida ranks number 40.
All right, with that, I'll have to be fair and move on to Mr. Mullane, and you have 1 minute to sum up. We already heard, well, that was Representative Urban had her chance, so now it's your closing.
The only thing that's going to solve the problems in the state of Connecticut is a good economy and a healthy business climate, and that will resolve all the issues with the income. And we've got to, first of all, cut spending. And I've got a list of those marked up for you, which I'd be glad to provide, okay? And that's going to be painful. I'm of the opinion if Diana Urban goes to the state of Connecticut, it's going to be business as usual. The leadership will take care of everything in the back room. She will have no say about the major things and where we're going and how it's going to happen. That's the way it goes. Somewhere around 11:30 on the last day, you get a budget that's about this high, and you're told you're going to vote for it at 12 o'clock, half an hour later. Okay, you don't even know what's in it. But when you go do the implementer bills, you say, I voted for that. It's not a good system, and the leadership is running it. She's going to do what they say, and there's not going to be any question whatsoever about it. So I think we can do it much better, and I think I can be that person.
All right, thank you. We thank both our candidates. We thank you for watching, and this debate will remain available on theday.com right up until Election Day. Please make sure you vote November 8th. Thank you, and good afternoon.